We should be able to.
So anybody who's on group chat can see if I share my screen. Is that correct?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, good. So we're going to start, oh, how do I do this? Okay. And this is going to be sort of not the most polished presentation, so I apologize because I'm having trouble going back and forth between Google Hangout and Keynote. So I did a little presentation in Keynote, so hopefully you guys can be able to see that. Okay, if I share my screen, here it is. Do you all see this? It says the opportunities of narrative.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to sort of breeze through this. Natalie, keep me honest. Keep me to 15 minutes, okay?
Okay, will do.
Okay. So, and tell me if anybody doesn't, all of a sudden you can't see the screen. Okay? So we're talking today, the webinar, first of all, Natalie, thank you so much for putting this together. We worked, Internews, I worked with Internews late last year and early this year, right? Natalie, it was a year ago, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, to start thinking about how you might use some transmedia storytelling methodologies to create more interesting engagement, and how engagement might lead to innovation within storytelling for Internews per se. Not necessarily on the ground, even though we did talk about that, but it was really sort of this internal inquiry about how we might leverage some of these techniques. So what I look at in my practice, I run a narrative design practice for social impact in human rights and global development. I run it out of New York City. And what I'm really interested in are two things. What are the power of narrative in creating action on the ground in rights and development, and also to capacity build organizations that are working in these realms. What is the power of narrative to be able to do that work more effectively? And the second thing I'm interested in is in narrative power, which is looking at the sources of power that you get from owning your own story and distributing your own story. And that's sort of a community level inquiry, but it's also about how we might look at narrative power as a means of gaining access to decision making alongside, bureaucratic power or charismatic power or any of these things. So when I talk about the power of narrative, I'm looking at things like engagement, like audience engagement or stakeholder engagement. I'm looking at something that I call surface area, which is really like increasing the number of ways that your audiences or stakeholders can come into the work that you're doing. And the work that you're doing is framed as a story world. And I'm also looking at sort of the design and innovation communities, right? So we're looking at the power of story and the power of narrative and the design of technologies and distribution techniques to start increasing connection points, networks, dialogue, opportunities, things like that. In terms of narrative power, what I'm looking at is framing. Like who gets to own your story, who gets to frame the narrative around that. I'm not talking about propaganda, I'm talking about framing. I'm talking about making sure that the political, social, and cultural are highlighted, right? So that when we're looking at decision making or action or program design, that we're taking these into account at a human level. Right? So what is the effect of these things on human beings and the way they have to live their lives? And what I was talking about, a seat at the table. Making sure that there are people, even if you don't have bureaucratic power, for example, that narrative power will maybe get you to be part of decision making.
Lina, are you progressing through your slides? I just wanted to check because we're still on the first one.
Oh, I've gone through 4 slides already. Okay, can you see this?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Is that better?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. So you missed this slide. I mean, I'll send you this, and you can distribute it, Natalie. That's fine.
Okay.
Okay, so then what we're looking at, I'll do this fast, because what we're looking at is when you combine power of narrative and narrative power is basically this notion of setting a cultural stage to cultivate impact. So what you're looking at is the ability to not just look at data, not just look at policy, but looking at cultural expression, cultural identity as means of cultivating impact. You're also looking at the humanization of issues, hopefully. And then you're looking at these three things, which are shifts in perception that lead to calls to action, that lead to impact. And I'll get into that part in a bit. So the statement that I sort of made, and I think anybody who's been talking about impact metrics in the last couple of months or this year, there's been this huge uptick in discussion around impact metrics around media and storytelling and these things. And a lot of people are looking at data and big data and all these things, and it seems to me to be, this is a generalization, but sanitizing the discussion a little bit around what impact really means in community on the ground. So what I'm looking for is creating media and cultural expression to have the power to contextualize human need and experience, and combined with data and policy to catalyze change that way. So the framework that I've created, it's called Transmedia Activism, but that's a very, very particular, that's only in the activist context. So the broader realm is narrative design for social impact. So what it is a framework for strategy to create social impact, influence perception, and build community through fragmented storytelling from authors, stakeholders, and communities who are sharing assets, who are creating this sort of increased surface area for discussion and action into issues and solutions across multiple forms of media. Okay. The reason that I think this is important is to be able to sort of do multiple distribution and multiple author creation storytelling that is coordinated is that you get to tell a story together. So it's not single voice storytelling, it's not one person's perspective, it's a number of different perspectives. And you also, it's a lot easier to tell a story of complexity, right? So it's like this notion of ecosystems, of what is one issue. If you're talking about water access, you're never just talking about water access, right? You're talking about infrastructure and policy and sanitation and security and all of those different things. And so it's a lot easier when you have multiple sources of story and multiple distribution points for story to tell that story of complexity. And then you get to tell a more engaging story. You get to tell a story that's based on the story of individuals, of like what is reality. And it might be fiction, it might be real, but it really is always grounded in the stories of individuals that then drives qualitative impact assessment. Okay. So when I think about this, when I'm thinking about the flow of story to actual change, I'm looking first, when your starting point is awareness. So what you're using story for is to sort of not to raise awareness and stop there, but it's really to create that stage where you're creating a little bit of awareness about what you're doing, about what the community is facing, what the context is in the political, social, cultural, any of those things. And then you start creating engagement. And that's a lot of what I do, right? So I'm looking at engaging audiences and communities into the next phase, which is action, actionable stories, and sort of creating the story universe. It's usually the NGO community that is directing what the appropriate action is, or community-level organizations, or community-level activists. It's not, I don't think that's necessarily the media folks who are sort of directing the appropriate action. And then that action hopefully leads to positive change, right? And you can map that. But it's like what we have to make sure happens is there's that flow so that we're not getting stuck in awareness. Often when you're using story, what you're doing is saying, this horrible thing is happening, and you need to know about it. And maybe you're engaging people in action like, oh, click here. But that's not enough, right? So it has to lead to a deeper sense of action. So how have I tried to do this? I will tell you about two very particular cases. Before I do that, does anybody have any questions about anything I've said so far? Because I've been talking really fast. No?
Nope.
Okay. Okay. So, oops, where is it? Can you see my screen now? My back?
I see the slideshow still.
You see it says Our Work Case Studies?
Yes.
Okay. So the way I got started in this was through one project in particular called Born to Brothels. I started out as an attorney. I was a practicing attorney, a very disaffected one. And then went into I was the executive director of a couple of nonprofits. One of the nonprofits was aligned with a movie called Born to Brothels, which won the Oscar in 2005. And this was 2005 was before social media, it was before Facebook, Twitter, any of those things. But what we managed to do was create a number of different assets and a number of different engagement channels that then brought people into the story of the children who were in the film. The story is about children in the red light district in Calcutta who are the children of sex workers who basically learn how to do photography and what that does to their sort of notion of self and self-direction and how they themselves can learn to accommodate and change their environment. So that's what the film was about, and we created this entire sort of cross-media effort to get people to, primarily in this case, to donate money to build a home and school for children in Calcutta in the red light district. So that was more of an advocacy and fundraising kind of thing, but it showed me the power of story. It showed me the power of art. It showed me the power of how you bridge that gap between people who want to help, in this case mostly general audience, and some policy people, and get them to commit to a very low-level, entry-level action, but it was pretty effective. And then I started moving on to other films, like The Devil Came on Horseback, which is about Darfur, and those actions were very different. Those were a part of a divestment movement, but using the story of this film to try to sort of look at political action from Washington and divestment. And then a film called Inocente, which was a fairly limited cross-media thing, but it was really about looking at the issue of child homelessness. This too won the Oscar last year, and it's about looking at child homelessness and the role of arts education for poor populations in the United States. And we sort of put together a cross-media engagement strategy for that. I wanted to show you a trailer for this film called Who Is Dayani Cristal, and then show you the website and how we constructed it. Now this is a sort of, when I talk about story engagement leading to action, this is probably where I can demonstrate this best. So let me see if I can show you the trailer. Hold on. If I go full screen, do you see this, Natalie?
I'm still on the slideshow.
Okay, hold on a second. Do you see this?
Still on the slideshow.
Okay, hold on a second. I think you might have to click on your screen sharing. Yes. Now do you see it?
No, it's still the same for me.
Does anybody else see my screen?
Still seeing the slides.
Oh God. Okay. How do I do this? Okay, let me stop sharing my screen for one quick second. Okay. Let me do this. Screen share. Screen share. Okay, now do you see it?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to play this. If I did go full screen, do you see it?
Yep.
Okay, great.
Is there a sound to it, Lina? Because we don't hear that.
These people, as much as they are invisible in life, they're invisible in death. It's very hard to identify them. Nobody's out there searching for them.
Dayani Cristal was definitely an atypical case.
Who's this person? We don't have any report of somebody who was missing that had those tattoos. We're trying to see if somebody knows this person and try to ID them.
En vida era considerado invisible, un ilegal. Ahora en la muerte es un misterio por resolver. Nunca podré entender la dimensión de los peligros, solo puedo tratar de recorrer sus pasos.
People sneaking across the border. To my mind, the problem is all economic. American capitalist economy needs blue-collar labor.
For me, it's very frustrating knowing that somebody had a dream, but they ended up being a number, a statistic.
Okay, so this movie is about, let me go back to my screen. So this movie is about the U.S.-Mexico border and deaths along that border. And what we've done is sort of created this 6-point, oh, you can, sorry, can you see this? There you go, can you see this?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what we've done is we've created a sort of, in consultation with NGOs over pretty much a 2-year period, while the movie is in production and then thereafter, we created this sort of 6-point social action plan arising from the systems in which we think, NGOs have told us that migrants are facing when they leave Central America, particularly Honduras, go through Mexico and then over and above the U.S.
Hey, how are you?
And so
I'm in now. John was able to get me in. I don't know. I don't know.
Let me mute that person.
I actually was locked out.
Okay, thanks. So
sorry.
No, not at all. So what we've done is we've created this website. It's a digital. It's the social action campaign is digital and real world. But in terms of digital, what we've done is we have this website that is dedicated to taking action, to learning more, and community-level storytelling. In terms of learning more, what we did was we worked. You can still see the website, right?
We're on your slides now.
Oh, geez, this is ridiculous. Okay, hold on.
No worries.
All right, I have to keep going back and forth. I apologize, guys.
I'll make sure to send out all the links to everything after too, so people can explore.
Okay, great. Okay, so this is the website. So this is the digital portion. There's a website, a media-rich website, and then there's also a book that we wrote that is free, and I will send you the link to that. Anybody can have the book if you have an iTunes account. If you don't have an iTunes account, tell me, and I'll get you a Dropbox link, and it's free to use and share. So the website, what we've done is we've gone to, so when you go to learn, there are these 6 points. We're looking at migration as a complex issue. We are not looking at violence. Violence and gang violence and the cartels, that's the #1 push factor for why people currently are leaving. But it's not the only one. It's the one that gets the most attention in a lot of ways. So what we looked at is economic development factors, like that's called the right not to migrate. We're looking at strengthening civil society, strengthening just development factors like water, education, things like that. A humane border and repatriating the dead and detention, deportation, those 3 together are looking at the border itself. We're looking at border policy, which is militarized and privatized in this country. We're looking at the challenge for identifying and repatriating dead migrants. And we're looking at the uptick in detention and deportation, which is also privatized, and creating sort of information around that. We're looking at the safety through Mexico, that journey, and then we're looking at labor demand in the U.S., like what's our responsibility. And you can explore this later, but you can take a look at what we've done. So we have intro with more like an overview of the problem. We have videos that are tagged to this, to the right not to migrate. We are looking at photography images from the project. Anybody can pull these down and use them as long as they credit us. Links to find out more from partners and our own research, very spare. And then we commission an essay for each of these issues from someone who's working on the issue specifically. And then you can take action here, or you go here. If you want to bypass all of your learning, you can donate, take action, or contact your representative. There are different ways to do this for each action.
Wow.
Okay? So then the next thing is border stories. These are community level stories. You can read them, you can add your own. Or if you yourself are missing someone, you can find a missing person by going directly to our partner's website to do that. Okay? So that's the way we've constructed this. This, like I said, this took about 2 years to put together in terms of the information gathering, the commissioning, the images, all of that, and then the release and engagement around this. We've hired press relations people to help us push this content as well.
So, Lina, what was the team behind this project?
Yeah, so the team behind this project is I am co-directing with the film's director, Mark Silver. So he and I basically conceived the entire thing in consultation with our NGO partners, and that I kept that really small, right? So it's like National Council of La Raza, the Washington Office on Latin America, Colibri Center for Human Rights. There are like 3 to 4 core partners that helped us create this, the Ford Foundation. And Mark and I, and then we hired an outreach coordinator who is native Spanish speaking, who works on both sides of the border for us. And then we have a web designer and a graphic designer who helped us design the book. And we have action toolkits and things like that that are available for download on the website. So it's basically a team of 3 people with vendors and a few partners. Okay? Okay. So that's that. And then I'll show you very quickly another thing before we flip into, if Rafiq and Jean-Luc, if you want to start, we can start talking about your project and talk about how we might do this for you. But let me just show you something else. This is totally different. This is an image from, do you see this, Natalie?
Yes.
Yeah. This is an image from something called Priyashakthi, which is not yet launched. It's an augmented reality comic book and mural series. Yeah, so what it is, it's in reaction to the December 16th, 2012 rape and eventual death of the young lady who was known as Nirbhay in New Delhi. And the creator of this project was in New Delhi at the time. He was part of the protests, and he just heard the police officers basically say, well, it's too bad she got raped, it's too bad she died, but she shouldn't have been outside, she shouldn't have been out. And that attitude freaked him out so much. He's Indian American, that he decided to do something sort of cultural, right? To really start thinking about shifts in perception, particularly among youth. Like when you look at the surveys of youth, they still think that gender-based violence isn't as deep a problem as they probably should. And some people think that it's okay for certain women to be kept in line through violence. So we're trying to work with youth, particularly in lower income communities, but also through cafes. There's this whole cafe line in India who's going to be helping us distribute this content. Let me just show you this trailer. Do you see this?
Yep.
Priyashakthi is an innovative multimedia project that addresses attitudes to violence in India and around the world. Hindu gods and their moral tales are integral to the Hindu majority in India and the Indian diasporas. Priyashakthi provides a new narrative and voice in the mythological canon by placing the goddess Parvati, an immortal woman who is a rape survivor, at the center of the story. Central to Priyashakthi is an augmented reality comic book, which emulates a popular Indian comic book series that began publication in the 1970s and continues today. In our comic book, certain panels will be animated to feature real-life stories and voices of Indian women who have survived sexual assault and face the ensuing trauma and social stigma. These pieces will be short documentaries, but the women will be animated in order to protect their identity. The comic book will be released as a print and digital version, as well as an app and an animated film.
Whoa.
Yeah, so that's obviously really, really different than the Dayani Cristal, which is a lot simpler in a lot of ways in terms of the content. Now, both of these are going to be bilingual in the language. So Dayani Cristal, everything we've done is English and Spanish. This is going to be English and Hindi and then other regional languages in India. And even though there's a lot of sort of technology involved, everything that we've done, sort of, say, for example, for Dayani Cristal, can be printed off. Like, you don't have to necessarily have access to broadband. Like, you can just print out our book, for example, even though that's interactive. When you get it on iTunes and you load it on your iPad, you can navigate to video and things like that. But everything we've created is also this analog version. And the same thing with this project. You will be able to just get a plain old comic book if you can't get access to augmented reality. So that's sort of how we've been. Two very, very different projects, two very, very different treatments. But that was to show that there are many different ways to slice this apple. You know what I mean? There's more to my presentation, but I want to get to, I think, because we can talk about how you do this within organizations, kind of like what you and I did with Internews, or I've worked with, like, the World Bank, UNICEF, work with you guys, and then there are other projects of note. One of them is Rafiq's project, Adopt Stories, that I've sort of talked about. But I'd like to get to Jean-Luc and Rafiq, if you guys are still there. This is bad connection. I don't know if they're still there.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, I came back, and
Okay.
hopefully I'm going to stay on for a little bit longer.
Okay, good. So Jean, can you talk a little bit about the project that you're thinking about?
So this project, called Listening Project, was initiated by Mina, who's the director for media development for Internews here in South Sudan. And the whole idea is to collect narratives for people from around South Sudan, the experience during the war, and also focus on the future of South Sudan through the eyes of the youth. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
So we just finished a National Geographic photo camp, where I was in charge of recruiting 20 students from Juba University. Most of them came from the communication department, so they have a background in journalism. And the whole idea was help them get a tool, like photography tools. And in the evenings we share stories. Basically, we have like a sharing session where the students will share the experience taking pictures during the day, and then how that connect with their past life or the life they are having right now. So it was very interesting, and then I worked with a lot of audio, and I was just figuring out how to move forward with that conversation, which is, I think Rafiq is back and talk more about it as well.
Rafiq, are you there? Rafiq?
Yeah,
Hello?
sorry, I dropped out for a while, but
We're sort of in the.
hello.
Hi, we can hear you.
Yeah, sorry, I lost the connection for quite a while there, so I just joined back in for the tail end of what Jean-Luc was saying there, just in time for him to say that I could tell you about it, but I'm not sure what he said.
So what we're talking about right now is Jean-Luc caught us up with how you've done some community level story collection.
Yeah, well, we've been trying to do a little bit, and we've had the opportunity to do some recently, but I guess we're still trying to figure out what we're gonna do with that, and from a kind of have a more, I guess, existential question about kind of what we're very interested in collecting these stories and doing something positive with them. I think there's a great urge amongst the people that we're working with to tell their stories.
Yeah.
But other than the fact that these stories are sort of inherently interesting and sort of emotionally powerful, I guess you know, Lina, you talk a lot about impact, and I think that in order to have an impact with these stories, we kind of need to figure out what our purpose in sharing them is, and then how do we fit that into our work here and you know, turn it into something that has an impact and is positive in the way that we think it can be.
Yeah, so this would be an Internews project.
Sorry, I missed you. My connection's really not very good.
Sorry. So this would be an Internews project was the question.
Yeah, I think yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's an Internews project, but it's a project that doesn't really exist. We're kind of making it up as we go along. So there's no specific funding or staff time for it or anything at this point. Where Jean-Luc and I are working as part of the Humanitarian Information Service project.
Mm-hmm.
Something that we would like to develop or kind of and potentially if we can, you know, do it that way.
The first question I would ask is, Natalie, I will send you the canvas that we used as well. Remember the canvas that we used to think about strategy? So I will send that to you, Rafiq. It's a canvas that I use to think about how I structure a project or a campaign. And it's free, so you can just have it. The first question that I usually ask when I start one of these projects, and there's a treasure trove of content or the possibility for content. Number one is what are we trying to change in the communities that we're working with, and not we as in like the storyteller, but I mean the community. What is the greatest need in terms of, and obviously in South Sudan there are many needs, but what can you have? What can you actually create movement and flow on in terms of impact? Is it awareness raising? Like, is there not enough attention on what's happening in the South Sudan globally? Number two, are there a set of solutions on the table that communities are advocating for, whether those are in development or rights or government policy, any of those things? Have you given a thought? Have you had a conversation with communities you're working with in terms of what is the greatest need that they want to work on?
I guess one, like as you say, there's many needs, but I guess the most obvious and kind of pressing is the need for peace. But that becomes an interesting issue then, because that's something that only South Sudanese are going to be able to really solve that problem. So our audience then becomes a local South Sudanese audience, and then we reach the issue of how do we access that audience? I mean, at the moment we're setting up radio stations here to try and reach people with information, and it's we're able to do that, but it's very hard to we're very limited in how we can. I think South Sudanese people are very limited in how they can talk to each other because of the lack of media here.
Yeah.
So that's, it gives us a limited palette, I guess, to some extent.
But probably
in terms of advocacy that's facing more. Sorry, go on.
I said that's probably more liberating too, because when we'll talk about outward facing in a second, but when you're thinking about how you're going to have to do a little more of a deeper analysis, I think, but when you think about if the greatest need right now is movement towards peace, first of all, what does that mean? Does that mean policies that advocate for cessation of warfare? Does that mean protection, child protection? What does that mean exactly? There are many ways to think about achieving peace. Number two is if your population, if your audience is internal and local, and you don't have media channels to reach them, how do you then start setting up audience distribution channels that engage those audiences, right? So, for example, in Sierra Leone, right after the Civil War ended, there was no way to disseminate information to local populations, and Banker White and Zach Niles, two filmmakers, American filmmakers from Vermont, ended up setting up a production company with local folks. Oh, Rafiq left. But they ended up setting up a local production and television station called We Own TV, which is local community access media. And they create media for that. And now that's been in operation for about 9 years, and they're the ones sort of like getting out a lot of information about sensitization around Ebola, because they can do that. They have the facility, and they're doing local community storytelling with it. So this is a short-term and a long-term effort that you're looking at, Jean-Luc and Rafiq. So the first question is, you have to identify with the community what is the greatest need, and moving for peace is the general bucket. But what does that really? The more specific you are, the more you're going to be able to achieve that end. And then you think about how you're going to be using community-level storytelling and global storytelling to reach that end, and how you reach people through the appropriate distribution channels.
Yeah.
So that's the.
I mean, yeah. I think you bring raising a lot of points that are very, very crucial. But I have been in this country for 2.5 months, and for someone who coming from a similar background, I think, because I was born in Rwanda, I think that, one of the greatest needs also is the people to communicate or to share stories with each other.
Mm-hmm.
People don't listen to each other really, or some people that live in the POC don't know what's going on outside of the POC, or people that live in the city don't know what's going on inside the POC. So that has been like a challenge because it's highly political,
yeah.
And also that's the biggest obstacle. As soon as you try to make people connect, then you become an enemy of the state or something like that.
Yeah. So, are you looking at a sort of a stealth campaign? Something that has to be not publicized?
Not necessary. I don't think we want to. I think we have to be as visible as possible so it's clear.
Okay.
I think for this past week I interacted with a lot of students, and I think they're hungry to express the opinion and share the stories,
mm-hmm.
and then also learn how to do so. And I think that's why I enjoyed some of the platform you had that allow people to share their own stories.
Yeah.
Which brings another element in terms of like languages, because people are still shifting to English, so a lot of people are very comfortable in Arabic.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be another element of if we want to put it global, because some of the stuff are going to have to be translated in English or in other language. But
yeah, and you can.
Definitely.
The translation is probably usually the easiest. You have to pay someone, so in terms of funding, it's not the easiest, but it is logistically one of the easiest things. What isn't easy is to think about appropriate technology platforms. So like I said, when
Yes.
we're doing Dayani Cristal and also Priyashakthi, we have to make sure that we have analog versions of everything that we do. And we have a film that's in English and Spanish, so we have a full-length film, so we can do screenings, and screenings bring people together in the same space. And often when you're looking at a population, say like in South Sudan, where you want to be able to get people face-to-face, like people looking at their screens, in this case, if you're really thinking about peace building, people looking at their screens at content if that's the only thing you're doing, you're missing out on an opportunity. Because what you're trying to do is get people to come face-to-face or share stories together to humanize each other. So what you're looking at is a set of activities and audience engagement that are going to have to be real world, like in the same space.
Yeah.
Yeah. Jean-Luc, is there a plan to display the photos from the photo camp in South Sudan?
So this past Saturday we had a gala that attracted like around 150 people. Mm-hmm. We had an exhibition, and then everybody keeps saying we want to see more exhibition because the students shot around 30,000 frames. So the photographer from NGO gave me the pictures, and then right now I'm going through them and making a new edit of the work, and then they have some beautiful, beautiful photographs that I'm start putting together for another exhibition. That's definitely something we are planning to do, and along the way we want to do more recording for stories, and that could be part of the exhibition as well. So with headphones and photographs, so people can come in, put the headphones on, and as they're looking at the pictures, also listen to stories.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that'd be really valuable. Right, so that could be one element. So what you would have to do, and like I said, I'm going to send you my planning tool, but what you should think about is, number one, the first question is always, what are we trying to change, we as a community?
Yeah.
Number two, and you do have to think very locally, the more micro you get in terms of your community, your audiences, get as specific as possible, and your desired end, the outcome, the more specific the better, because it becomes more achievable. So if you're trying for peace, you're not going to get there. You know what I mean? So you have to sort of think about the different ends to that larger goal. So the first question is kind of change. The second one is, who are our audiences in our communities?
Yep.
In that case, you've already identified sort of youth and students locally, who are different language speakers. Then you've identified a global audience. And then for that analysis, you have to figure out why do you need to reach a global audience? We know why you have to reach a global audience sort of, in general. But what is a global audience going to bring you in terms of meeting your end, whatever that specific end is within peace building in South Sudan? What will the global community do? I mean, if the global community is, and what does a global community look like? Is that the UN community? Is that humanitarian organizations like Internews? Is that other students who are going to empathize with the students in South Sudan? You can create that connection of empathy. Like, who are these people? And why do you need to engage them? When you figure out why you need to engage them, then you start thinking about, well, how do we engage them? Like, where do they live? Are they on YouTube? Are they on Tumblr? Are they, in the local internet cafe? Like, where are they? And then you have to think about, how do you then frame that discussion? How do you use story, content, image to then create the discussion that then leads to the action that you're looking for, that your community is looking for? When I say you, I don't mean you, Jean-Luc. I mean you, the team.
Yes.
And that includes. So that's the way. That's what we built. That's why we built the Dayani Cristal thing. Like, we went through that entire analysis and then launched.
Yeah, I mean, those are very, very important questions. And as a storyteller, the challenge for me I see in this country is the limited movement. We don't really have a lot of movement. For example, I'm not allowed to go hang out with someone until the sunset, or follow them at night or early in the morning when they wake up. So it's only have like a window of a few hours with someone before I leave or they leave or something like that. So that's something I've been trying to think. How do I collect stories and then give them context without going to people's homes or spending time with them, because it's very difficult here. We have a curfew at 7 o'clock.
Yeah.
You know, I have to put a movement request to go anywhere. So sometimes it's very hard because I get interviews, but I don't have the luxury to spend time with someone or go to certain locations and then get to know people well. But I hope with time that I'm gonna have that possibility of going out more and spending time with people.
Is there another way to collect stories that wouldn't trigger inquiry? Like, is there a way to set up a very basic story collection website, like a WordPress site, where people can type?
That's another problem here. The internet is very slow. So asking people to go share the story on the internet would be very difficult. But the exciting part is through this National Geographic Photo Camp, I hired 5 TAs that are South Sudanese and working photojournalists. So, and they're very, very good. Some of them file for AP or raters, and that we've been thinking about. Oh, maybe these guys could be a great resource in terms of like helping us collect stories, because for them they can go wherever they want at any time of the day. And they can help us collect stories. So that's one of the venue we are really looking into, and getting them involved into this project, and then so they can go out there, collect audio and then stills or video for that's going to be part of the story.
And can you could you do something at a local university or something within curfew time where you ask, I don't know, 20, 25 people to come and they actually write out stories? Like on paper.
Yes, yes, that's possible. Yeah. Not National Geographic did it. Every evening, the students will write stories as well. And we have a really good relationship with Juba University. So I think that's a big possibility of collecting stories, like written stories, and they can even write in Arabic, and then they can be translated afterwards.
I mean, that's where I would start. I would start as analog as possible. I would start as simple as possible.
Okay.
That's where I would go.
And then also, I mean, well, go ahead.
No, and then once I think that, again, the story collection is only one part of it, though, right? So what you have to understand is why you're doing it. Like, you have to think almost like you're shaping a campaign.
Yes.
A storytelling project for a particular end is a campaign. You're thinking campaigns, not an art piece. I mean, it's an art piece, right? There's artistic merit to it, but it has to be part of a campaign aiming towards something.
Yes. Okay.
And your feet can work on that part.
Yeah. And the other part also is, I mean, South Sudan is one of the few countries around the world that has a lot of people in the diaspora. Those people are very, very much interested in what is going on. I mean, I keep meeting people that lived in Australia for 20 years or in the States for 20 years, and they decide to come back because they feel so, I don't know, attached to their homeland, and they want to be part of it. So I just keep thinking these are really, really good stories of people that are coming back, and I live in Vermont, so there's a lot of South Sudanese also that live in Vermont, and very much connected to the land, and they keep tuning into the stories. So that's another element to that. It's like the people living outside want to know what's going on in the country, and connecting with the people on the ground, and the people on the ground connecting with the people outside.
I think that's really key. I think the ability to attract audiences that are in the diaspora, I think, is going to be really, really important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
So what I'll do is, like I said, I will send you send you and Rafiq the canvas. I'll send it to you, Natalie, and then you can distribute that. And then if you have other questions, let me know.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. This is great.
Do you have any other questions? I think we're like getting towards the time of wrapping up, right, Natalie?
Yeah, we are.
And I think we've lost Rafiq and we lost a couple of other people. I think Shoshana is still on.
Yeah, we have some people who will probably watch the video after or might be watching YouTube. So we'll follow up with them.
Sure, absolutely. And they'll see how difficult it was for me to navigate Google Plus. Media people.
Lina, I have a question for you. Those those platforms do you use, are they generic? Can people use them, or they were built from scratch, or do you share them? How that works?
No, so the Dayani Cristal one was built from scratch.
Okay.
Yeah, it was built from scratch.
Okay.
So you can't necessarily use them, but you can. I mean, there are other ones that you can use. Shakti was built. I mean, just the website. The website doesn't do anything. It's a placeholder for people to come learn about the project. But that's not the project. In the case of Dayani Cristal, the website is a huge part of the project. That's our digital campaign hub. In the case of priyashakthi, it's not. In the case we don't have the website anymore because it was 10 years ago. But the Born to Brothels website, Kids with Cameras website, 10 years ago was very forward-looking, and it was a sort of a project hub site that you could purchase things on. We ended up selling the kids' photography out of Kids with Cameras to help pay for their educations.
Okay.
So you can. That's another thing you could think about doing is if these kids or these people are, sort of creating artwork or photography, you could try to sell that for them. Like that's one way of contributing back.
Yeah. People are pushing very hard to want to buy the pictures actually too during the photo camp, and we haven't figured a way to do so because I mean they maintain the copyright, and we try to figure a way in a sensitive way to do so without maybe there's a student who doesn't get the pictures sold, how they're gonna feel. So we try to figure out maybe how to create a foundation that's gonna maybe buy more cameras and more gear for them or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
On a side note, actually, when I was in India in January after the rape you were mentioning, and I did work on a project initiated by an Indian woman. We were going on the street and asking men and women what they thought about the rape. It was a very interesting. I was in Delhi for like 15 days, and we spent a lot of time on the streets. Bus stops, market, interviewing men about the impression regarding the rape. Some of them we blame the women for not dressing appropriately, and other will be like, we have sisters and wives. So it was very interesting to be able to witness that. It was amazing.
Do you remember the name of the project?
It's called Black Dot Project.
You know Chaya.
Yes, I know Chaya.
That's pretty funny. Okay, yeah, I know that project very well.
That's so funny. Yeah, I know Chaya. Yes.
Okay, good.
I met her through her partner, who did the project for USID. And we have a common friend who was in India working from Vermont. So. And that's how I got to connect with them and then spend some time with them.
Very cool. Yeah, that's a cool project.
They're great people. Yeah.
Yeah, good. All right, so I will send you, Natalie, I'll send you stuff. Jean-Luc, and when you talk to Rafiq, if you guys have questions, let me know.
Okay.
And Natalie, is there anything else?
No, I think that's it.
Okay.
Thank you, Lina.
Yeah, sure, that was great. And then you and I should, Natalie, you and I should reconnect about like how you're going on with work that we.
Yeah. Absolutely.
John, thank you so much.
Well, thank you. It was a pleasure. Thank you so much. Have a good rest of the day.
All right, you too.
Bye.
Yeah, bye. Bye. Bye.